and welcome back to the Riri Show. I am here and back with a very special guest from SubQuery, which they describe as a blockchain developer toolkit, which forms the backbone of Web3 infrastructure. So please welcome the amazing James Bailey. Hi, James.
Riri, thanks for having me here. I am really looking forward to this show today.
Yeah, me too. I'm looking forward to chatting with you too. It's always my favorite. I always say this, but any project that's kind of newer to me, I'm really excited about because it's a good learning opportunity for me as well. So I'm really excited to hear what you guys have going on, and especially because you're so unique. I haven't talked to a project quite like you guys, which is really exciting because you do deal a lot with data, etc. So this will be fun to learn about. It would not be the Riri Show ever if I didn't start with the classic intro. It's how I do everything because I like to learn a little bit about you. So if you can just tell me a little bit about yourself to begin with, tell me about your role at SubQuery and your journey into crypto, etc. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, so, well, my name's James. I'm the head of business development at SubQuery. I worked as I kind of studied as computer programming years ago, and I went into development many years ago and found out very quickly that I was a terrible developer. So I kind of ran away from that as soon as possible, and I went to a bit more product management. I've been kind of involved in crypto for a while. Back in 2018, I met a guy called Sam, who was the CEO of SubQuery, and he was doing something slightly different. And we were talking, and then one day he kind of said, "I've got this new thing. Do you want to help me do some for it?" And I kind of joined part time at the start. It was kind of a good little side gig and see what it's like. And quickly I realized that crypto doesn't sleep. You can't really do it as a side gig. So all this wrinkles and slightly more, blonde hair is because of the lack of sleep and thing what crypto does to you, right? So I've been working at SubQuery and another company called Finality for about a year and a half, and it's been crazy since then. And one thing I found is I came from a product management background, and selling a product idea internally to a company, which is what product management is deciding what to build and what problems we're solving by building it. Those same skills translate to talking to our customers, right? So we build technical products, mostly for customers around the ecosystem, and explaining to our customers, which are the developers you'll probably talk to already, a lot of them on the show, why they need SubQuery and how SubQuery solves some of their problems. It's the same way you talk about value when you're talking about value internally as a product manager. So it's been an interesting jump over, a lot of new skills to learn, but really exciting, and things are crazy. So there's no problem there.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I can totally relate about the crypto doesn't sleep thing. I feel like, my sleep patterns and I'm aging a little faster these days than I was before.
It's like Barack Obama before and after he was president, like before he was this young guy with dad bod, and then after he was,
yeah, 100%. It's like I should have taken a picture of me before crypto, and then, well, I guess we'll see me age through the videos, I guess. So we'll see what happens here. But I can relate, and I know it takes a lot. And the one thing actually that was interesting when I was kind of reading through a little bit about SubQuery is like developers are some of the longest hours and the hardest workers in the space, right? And that's who you guys are kind of targeting ultimately, right? So I can only imagine the amount of work that you have to do in order to work with developers on top of that. So I can imagine your sleep hours are very limited, but I'm sure the space is grateful. So anyway, tell me a bit about the launch of SubQuery. So like, how did you come up with the idea behind blockchain developer toolkit? What was missing in your eyes? What problems did you solve? Like, how did you come up with it? Or how did Sam come up with it?
Yeah, so we were talking to many teams back in late 2019. No, it was actually late 2021. So it's 2022 already.
It's hard. I know all the times are messed up.
And they're all talking about these same problems. And so maybe if I go back to what the problem that SubQuery solves, and really, if you imagine blockchain, and not many people understand exactly how blockchains work, it's a bit of a craziness. But the easiest way to explain it, I find, is imagine a book. Imagine the Harry Potter books, okay? And a blockchain is a chain of blocks. Imagine a book of pages, right? Every page is a new bit of data. And so in a blockchain, a new block's added every 6 seconds for Polkadot. In a book, a new page is written every 6 seconds. And that page includes everything that happened in the past 6 seconds. Now, if you're looking at Harry Potter and you want to create an application that shows all the different pages that the different characters appear on, like Ron Weasley or, Harry Potter himself, Hermione Granger, to find out that information, you'd have to go through every page one by one and looking for the different names that appear, the different characters that appear. And can you imagine how painful that would be to go through all the Harry Potter books to do, right? It'd take ages. But it's the same problem in blockchain. So the way that data is stored on a blockchain means in order to go find something, just answering a question like, show me a list of my past Polkadot, you actually have to go through every block sequentially to find that information. So it's kind of impossible to do a lot of, if you want to build applications, it's really hard to read the information directly from the chain because it's not stored in a way that you can access it. And that's what SubQuery solves. So SubQuery is a indexer. And what that means in a plain English is that we connect to a blockchain, in this case, any Polkadot or substrate-based chain, any parachain, doesn't matter. And we, you as a developer, like define how it works. So you'll say on a certain event or on a certain extrinsic or on every block, let's say, we want to take that information and I want to take out certain things, like, for example, the character's name, and I want to save that into a database. And a database for non-technical people is like a big spreadsheet, right? And the spreadsheet you can sort and filter and do everything you want to do, right? So it's taking that data from a format that's really bad to query and processing it constantly in the background as soon as things happen into a format that's very easy and very fast and very efficient to query. It's essentially building a set of data that you can then build an application on top of. And we, in short, the outcome is that we're here to help developers, whether they're building an NFT platform or DeFi platform or whatever. We're here to help developers build better applications by providing them with data in a more effective, easier, efficient way. And we've built this tool, this pipeline, to be as easy to build as possible, right? That's our mission.
Right. And I can just imagine too, just the way you're speaking, like how much time that would save, because I think time is a major contributor to, developing, obviously, and developing something you're proud of, because, time is money. And I think a lot of us, we wanted things to be fantastic and perfect, but there's also time restraints. So it does save a lot. SubQuery does mention being the backbone of Web3 infrastructure, which I kind of mentioned before. And this is kind of an interesting question, not really even related to SubQuery, but what does Web3 mean to you?
And so, Web2 is this, like if you look at the internet, right, Web1 was this idea that the websites would create content and you would read content on the internet. It's like Wikipedia, I guess, or maybe not Wikipedia, but, like a news site on the internet. So the company on the internet creates the content and you read that. Web 2 was dominated by user-generated content. So I'm not reading what's given to me. I'm reading content that other people created and are sharing around. So Facebook, Instagram, it's about generated content. Web 3 is thinking of things differently. So rather than, it's all about, Gavin Wood did a great single line explanation of this, which I can't recall right now, but it's basically the main difference of Web3 is about the ownership of the information. So rather than being served up by a big internet company what you get, and you don't really have control of that, you have a bit more control around what you want and what you'll pay for. And there's more obvious value transactions that occur then. So rather in Web2, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. In Web3, it's a bit more obvious how there's a value transformation through this ecosystem and who's paying for it in the end. So there's a lot of, that's a very high level explanation. It's a very terrible explanation. And that's one of the biggest problems of, I think, Web3. That's our biggest problem as an industry as a whole, I think, is that we're really bad at explaining what it means to the average layperson. But what it means is something probably easier to explain. So rather than what it is, explain by what the outcome is and what the benefits are. And it's around, ownership of the information. It's around more transparency about how the information got to you or what happened with the information. It's around control over that information. And it means that it's just a more fairer, equitable transparent internet than what we have today.
Absolutely. And I think that's you really hit a good point there, because I also think that, Web3 is something that really is needed at this exact moment in time, which is odd, because a lot of things, transpire at wrong times. But I feel like the way that we are seeing and receiving data online, or information online, or really anything online, is a lot of misinformation now, or you know what I mean? And I think that Web3 is I feel like we're entering into this time like at a very critical point in society. So I really like your explanation, actually. And it's one of my favorite questions to ask, just simply because everybody does have a different explanation. Like, I've never heard the same thing twice, other than, bringing up obviously Gavin Wood, because he does talk about it quite often. So I love that. So you are, or SubQuery is Polkadot native, as we know. So why did you choose this route when deciding where to launch?
Look, we've always been in the substrate space. Like, our CTO at SubQuery was part of I think the second ever Polkadot hackathon back in China years ago. So we've kind of always been familiar with it. But one of the best things about Polkadot, and I guess this is why a lot of the developers in here, you see all these reports about the number of developers in Polkadot. It's like the second largest ecosystem behind Ethereum. Is how permissive substrate is, how much you can do with it. And you see that today, every day, by looking at the variety of different parachains that are coming online, the different ideas that people are solving and how they're solving those. So developers are really enjoying the freedom that substrate brings, and the obviously the speed and scalability improvements that Polkadot brings as well. But yeah, Polkadot's our home. We've been here for a long time, and we've grown with the ecosystem, and so it always will be our family. And it is a very tight knit family. That's probably the best thing about Polkadot in my mind. Is, I'm not a developer, so I don't really care about how great it is to develop on. But I think one of the most, and from my perspective as a business and business development, one of the most amazing things about Polkadot is that every team is talking, and we're all talking with each other. We're all in the same Discord and Element groups. And we're all working together to achieve shared goals. And that shared direction, that shared mission, we're doing it slightly different ways in our own different parachains, but that really brings us together quite well. And we have a very tight-knit community in Polkadot that's quite obvious.
So it sounds like that's something you guys kind of kept in mind originally anyways, like Polkadot was kind of your goal, hey?
Yeah, that's true. So we started in Polkadot, really focused on Polkadot for the first year, and we made sure that our tool would work across Polkadot. We've since then, we do have ambitions of a multi-chain future, right? Like, Polkadot itself is multi-chain in a way, with the layer 0 parachain stuff, and so we've always believed that there is a multi-chain future. So we have extended SubQuery to Avalanche. We've also extended to Terra, which was terrible timing, unfortunately. But despite that, there's a lot of builders in that Terra community that will be moving elsewhere, and we're looking at where we can go with them. And we expect to expand SubQuery to other Generation 3 Layer 1 chains over time, because this tool is so useful for people to build applications, and there's a lot of ecosystems out there that don't have an existing tool like it. And those developers, they're living in the dark ages.
Yeah, they are living in the dark ages, especially when we have SubQuery. And you know what? Definitely. And I think that's something that is highly respected about the Polkadot ecosystem, is it's a less competitive and more collaborative environment. And I've mentioned this before in previous interviews when we've talked about different projects and them branching out and being multi-chain. So definitely, that's something that I respect about the ecosystem, what I love about it so much. Because I think, in terms of technology, you like, as many brains and as much knowledge can work together and push it forward, the better, right? And I think you learn and do a lot more amazing things when you work in collaboration rather than competitively. So I actually really like that that's your mind frame there. So we kind of already mentioned a little bit, I mean, we've talked about this briefly, but maybe you want to elaborate here, is, we talked about how developers are extremely busy, and how that solves a lot of efficiency problems and stuff like that. So in terms of like advantages or incentives that exist here to draw in customers, is there any more that you could elaborate on there?
Yeah, developers are busy. You know how we said before that the one
Yeah.
thing you don't get in Web3 is sleep, or the more important problem is the one thing you don't get in Web3 is spare time. Um, ask my girlfriend about that.
Yeah.
Um, and and so yes, one of the biggest reasons that we come as we attract customers to us is that by using us, you basically can cut out 3 months of development. And we've had a customer say that thank God that we talked to you at the right time, because we would have gone off and built our own indexer in house, and it would have just taken another few months to do. This is my stupidest idea. So um, we're doing a lot of work around, and really I think it's the ecosystem growing up and realizing that we can't spend all our time like building our own versions of things. We've got to start building these like common tools so we can reduce the amount of duplication of effort. And I do believe that's one of the drawbacks of Polkadot is all these parachains being developed simultaneously, and I think there's a lot of duplication of effort that's happened in this. And I think we'll see over time more people kind of sharing around components and using those, because you can just focus more on those. We're starting to move from more kind of outreach to customers to more inbound. So we still do a lot of work with hackathons and workshops and grant programs. And we actually have our own grant program, which we've kind of set up to give back to the community, because SubQuery itself was built from a Web3 Foundation grant, and we are now at a point where we can help others build their first application and go out there and launch. So for us, it's very important now as we get bigger and bigger to kind of focus on more of the early stage development community, and make sure that when you start in Polkadot, when you start building your first ever chain or your first ever application, you don't spend all this time in the dark kind of looking around like, what can I use and how can I solve this problem, and this problem is stopping me. And instead, it's a bit more like a guide. We're like, okay, well, that is easily solved by this solution by that team, and this is easily solved by this tool, and all these things will save you about a combined 3 or 4 months, because
Which
that's
is
what
a
we need
long
to do.
time in crypto. 3 to 4 months is a long time.
It's a huge amount of time, and as a developer, it could be the difference between the success or failure of your project, right? So time to market's important, and we can do better as an ecosystem to show people where the common paths, and like this is small hacks or small changes or small different tools that you could use to save you time that compounds.
100%, absolutely, and I can see the value there for sure. And actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself here a little bit, so we'll talk about this a little later on. But I do want to talk about your contribution to the ecosystem, because you guys do a lot in terms of like interviewing and AMAs and other things too, to kind of unite everybody. But I'll get into that after. But let's go through a little bit of like actual like the grunt work and the stuff behind SubQuery. So you have these different categories through SubQuery, which is kind of interesting, and I really like the way that you laid everything out here. So you have SubQuery project. So are you able to walk me through like the process of creating a project? I know simplicity was something that is important to you guys, and you kept in mind, and you've mentioned that kind of throughout some of your documents.
Yeah, so a SubQuery project is a atomic all-in-one project that will take the data directly from your blockchain and provide you with a GraphQL endpoint. It's essentially all you need to index data from any substrate chain and have it ready for your application. And it's all in one, okay? You can think of it like a scaffold. So when you're building a project, you'll use a kind of command line tool to initialize one, and you can initialize it based off like an example project to get you started. And there are 3 main files that you edit. So the first one is, actually I could do a little demo here, why not? That's a perfect opportunity.
Yes.
I won't demo VS Code, but I'll just pick up my GitHub here and just show that off. So this is a very basic example that indexes every single Polkadot transaction on Polkadot. The first file I edit is a GraphQL file. Now this defines the final result. This is what I'm trying to get at the end, okay? So in that example we did before, where we did like Harry Potter characters, we might have 2 different entities. One is a character, which has like name and pages. And then there's a second entity, which might be like appearances. And like every appearance, you record, and they kind of combine up to the character. So in this case, I have a count. all the accounts on Polkadot, and I have transfers. And so an account might make multiple transfers. They might receive multiple transfers. And a transfer always has two accounts attached, right? Who sent it and who received it. So very simple. That's the final result. Then I have a manifest file. This is like the when and where am I indexing stuff from. So in this case, I'm indexing stuff in Polkadot. Now, remember, we focus on building this SubQuery tool. So we've done a lot of indexing improvements, some pre-computed caches, speed improvements, everything. We've done all that stuff so that we've optimized indexing speed. And one of the ways we do that is something called a dictionary. But it's an example of like why recreate the wheel when we've already built a really nice wheel that runs really, really smoothly. And then we have handlers. So a handler is you say, on this event, I want to do something. And a common example would be like there's a block handler. Every block let's do something, which is really inefficient because every block might not have anything you care about. Probably be smart would be like, okay, I only want to look at, in this case, transfer events, which represents the transfer. And that means we only just look for the transfer events. We skip everything else. This can go, like a normal project will have lots of different handlers. So if you're building like an NFT marketplace and you want to like analyze the ownership of NFTs over time, every time an NFT is transferred, you might record that. Every time an NFT is minted, you might record that. Anytime an NFT is like upgraded or some evolution occurs, you might record that, right? So you have all these different handlers for different events. And then my final file of 3 is a mapping file. And the mapping file is just really describing what the pipeline is. So in mine, it's very simple. I receive a transfer event, and substrate events have data in this kind of payload here. I take that information out, and I create a from account, where I first check if the one exists. If there doesn't, I create a new one. I create a to account. Again, check if one exists or not. And then create a new transfer entity. And so in this mapping method, it's still all in TypeScript, so it's very easy to develop. There is, you can do anything you want. So you can retrieve data, you can update data, you can delete data, you can save data. You can do anything that you want. So you, like, by default, you are limited to the Polkadot stuff, but you could also like request information from CoinMarketCap or CoinGecko. You could get like the current exchange rate of a certain asset at a time. You could request for the weather on that day. You could do whatever you want. So whatever you want to do in this, completely up to you, okay? But this here, this all runs in one command. It will start indexing data. We'll put it into a Postgres database. It'll give you a query endpoint. And you can run this on your own computer. It's all open source. Some customers of ours have kind of like changed the code to suit their product better. But we also provide a managed service, which is a second product. So our managed service, the hypothesis is the last thing that developers want to do is run infrastructure. It's painful. It sucks. It breaks all the time. It's just the worst idea, okay? Especially like when Elon Musk tweets about your new application while you're sleeping and your traffic goes through the roof by like 100 times, you don't want things to break. So we run a hosted service, and you can give us your project and we'll run it for free. And we run projects for all of the biggest teams in Polkadot. We run it for like Nova Wallet, Fearless Wallet, Sub Wallet, Metadot as well coming out. So all 4 big wallets. Many different NFT platforms, Polkadot, a lot of Moonbeam NFT platforms, Parallel Finance, Carla, all the big networks will have projects they run different applications on. There's literally everything here. It's like there's like thousands of projects. Unfortunately, it's like there's too many projects now that I can kind of go through and show kind of cool ones. But we run these in a managed service, and people can make requests directly for the data from these. And you can also like go in and look at like, okay, if I want to see like how Nova Wallet's using it for their Moonbeam project, I can go in, I can look at their project, I can make some example queries when it loads in our playground, and I could also look at their GitHub, and I can see what the code that they've written. So I could then maybe extend what they've done and change it slightly for me. I could be inspired by what they've built and do something different. And yeah, so there's a lot of things, and there's also a decentralized version of this. So this is centralized, this hosted service. It's doing hundreds of millions of requests per day, like a huge volume of requests. It's crazy. But that shows you how big the ecosystem is growing. But we are furiously working away to get a decentralized version of this going. And decentralizing this means that you can decentralize your entire infrastructure. So rather than relying on SubQuery to run your production grade data, like your API for your application, you can run your API in a decentralized way where your community can run these indexes and they can be rewarded for doing so. And we're building that now. We just finished a phase of our test network where we had 156 indexes on there. We simulated almost 200 million daily requests for it in a single day. And we're rapidly going forward to launch a network. And this is all happening right now. So basically an alternative infrastructure solution for your next big project.
This is huge. This is huge. And something that I like that you've incorporated is you just kind of talked about the community able to see and use the data as well. And I think that's really interesting because when I was first reading about SubQuery, it sounded very targeted towards developers in particular, but really it helps out a community of people. So it's really interesting that way. And this demo is awesome too. I'm really enjoying seeing it live because I think also UI UX plays a giant role in kind of the I don't really know how to describe it, but how somebody uses something, experiences something, and is able to kind of use that entire project or use all of SubQuery to the best of its abilities has a lot to do with UI UX. So I actually really like the way you have it laid out here. Awesome work.
And there's a new version actually coming soon. We do a lot of effort in UI UX. We have like 2 designers working full time on this, and it's not just the design. It's not just a really pretty user interface. It's also things like documentation. That's really critical. So we have like a full documentation site which goes into all these different pieces, tutorials, very technical guides. Well, that one's not working. Weird. Where you can look at, how certain things work, get examples. So it's very important that you look at this as a holistic process, right? So a developer can jump on this and learn how to build a SubQuery project without having to ask for help from anyone. They're empowered.
Right. And education in terms of that is so important too. And you do a lot in terms of education and information sharing, which I do really like. And I do have questions about that as well, but I do find it very easy to get answers to questions when you go and you research or look up SubQuery. SubQuery Network.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we have this centralized solution. And one of our biggest processes right now, one of our biggest goals this year is to decentralize that. And the reason why we want to decentralize that is all the benefits. Okay, so A is that there's a weird kind of paradox in Web3 right now, where a lot of our favorite decentralized applications still rely on some centralized services, and it's kind of a little bit weird. If SubQuery does go down, which we run this so it doesn't go down, it's run for like an enterprise level service. We get woken up in the middle of the night if there's any kind of spluttering on the servers. But if it does go down, your application goes down, and that's terrible. So the network is designed to decentralize that for reliability. You can have multiple people running it, and so if one goes down, ideally the others take up the slack. Secondarily, it's for performance. So at the moment, your application, you load Nova Wallet, for example, and you want to get a list of all your staking revenues. That Nova Wallet request will go to our servers for SubQuery. And I guess Nova Wallet has one in maybe like Frankfurt, let's say. But if you don't live in Frankfurt, you live a little bit further away from that, so do I. Yeah. So our internet call has to go around the world, basically, to Frankfurt and back, which takes some time. So by running more indexes around the world, you get better performance because it's just time to make that call across the world and back.
Yeah, 100%. We are on opposite ends of the earth, like seriously right now though. That wasn't a joke.
And then also just encouraging the community, right? Like Web3 is all about building a community, and having a few different centralized providers doing it all isn't really what we're trying to get. We're trying to build a community that can do them themselves, so that if SubQuery, like the company, evaporates tomorrow, work will still operate. So for all of these reasons, we're building a decentralized network, and in a simplistic way, it's a data marketplace. So Riri, you want your Nova Wallet data, you want to see your staking revenues from Moonbeam. I have spent the time to index that information. I have it in my database. Essentially, you would pay me in SubQuery tokens for that data, and I would send that back to you. That's in simplistic terms. I'm an indexer, you're a consumer of that data. There's a third participant, which is a delegator, and the whole point of that is some people aren't technical, they can't run indexes, some people have no need to purchase data, but we still want to involve them. It still needs to be inclusive. So delegators can delegate or stake their spare SubQuery tokens to me as an indexer, and they can pick their favorite indexer who's doing well, who's earning a lot of revenue, and I can share some of my revenue with them for that staking revenue. Because the amount of rewards that I get is proportional to the amount of stake I have. By attracting more delegators to support me, I earn a bigger percentage of those rewards, and my delegators also receive a bigger in the end portion of rewards from themselves, from their work they do. So it's kind of it's quite simple when you really break it down, but it's all about making sure that we make it inclusive for different people, and making solutions so that most teams that are using our hosted service right now will be able to kind of seamlessly migrate to the decentralized network without you as a user of Nova Wallet noticing anything. That's kind of the aim.
Absolutely. And I like that you say that it's in simple terms. It's in simple terms for me, but you had to do all the work. So, but I appreciate that. So where are you in terms of Testnet? So you had some updates recently.
Yeah, so we've broken down our test network into like 3 different phases. Season 1, or 3 different seasons. Season 1 finished about a month ago, and that was a really small one. That was like 25, 30 indexes, like top tier node runners, just running our services. And it's really just for us to make sure that nothing was completely broken, okay? So what we could call an alpha. Season 2 has just finished last week. We had 156 indexes, and that included about 70 expert node runners, but also another 80 or so ambassadors that we have. And the best thing about this is that we got like all the different like levels of technical skills, right? So some of our ambassadors are experts, like the node runners, and some of them are not so much, right? They don't do DevOps for a day. They have never really set up a node before. But we got to test out our processes, our documentation, our support, how clear the process was, how easy it was to get started. And we got to test that for a lot larger number of people. So 156 indexes. We did some load testing, and as I said, we tried to simulate pretty real traffic loads, so like 200 million API calls in a single day. That's kind of what our hosted service was doing a couple of months ago. It's more than that now, but it was a good indication that we had a peak where like our load generators couldn't generate any more fake load. So it wasn't the network hitting a peak.
Yeah.
But all this means really good stuff, that our networks were as we hoped, and kudos to the development team. That's not me. I'm just a messenger here. The next network's operating fine, and the documentation is good, and that means that we can now move to our season 3. So we're going to probably kick that off soon, but it also gives us the confidence that we can move forward in terms of like public sale, getting ready for the mainnet, all these other pieces that that's a shame we're doing in a bear market, but that doesn't really matter. Builders keep building regardless of if it's a bear or a bull market.
100%. And actually something I always value and always say is that, a bear market is pretty much I don't want to say it's a good time for developers, but it's a time for developers to really put their heads down and do some serious work, because, that's what they're doing anyways, but there's not a lot of distraction during that time. And there's a lot that can get done during that time. So, without bear, we can't really have a bull. So there you are. So you did mention, SQT, your token, and you mentioned a little bit about utility. Are there any other like utilizations for your token? And can you tell me a bit about governance in association with SQT?
Yeah, so obviously the long-term goal here is to move more towards a DAO and to adopt certain qualities of a DAO. It's interesting, like I think there is a need for we're setting up, so when the network launches, there'll be a SubQuery Foundation, which is kind of designed, and their whole mission statement is around the governance of that network, okay? And that foundation will be, the council will be kind of elected, and we'll reveal more information about that, but really their goal is to like shepherd and steward the SubQuery network to where it's meant to be in 5 years' time. So it's interesting to see different teams and how much they like adopt a DAO from day one versus how much they kind of phase it in. I think there's a balance that needs to be done here. Like you need to have like a dedicated team to like, this is our day-to-day job. This is our main priority for the year, is to grow this ecosystem, is to improve the product, is to build awareness, all these things. Having a fully run community DAO at day one is like, it's a bit tricky in terms of like everyone is their side job. It's not their like day job. So I expect that we'll kind of adopt those qualities over time, but it is a long-term, like 5-year objective to kind of just completely decentralize the SubQuery network. Obviously the SubQuery token will play a role in that. And we're distributing the SubQuery token at the public sale, like the foundation get a good package so they can start doing all these community events, grants, bug bounties, all the different stuff by those reserves that they start with.
That's fantastic. And what I was going to ask you too, which is funny, but you kind of already covered this, and I don't really feel like it pertains to you guys because most of the time I talk about partners and consumers, etc. But for you guys, what's really interesting about your project is you really target everybody.
Yeah, that's a big difference in us. And I think that's one of the weird differences between us and other projects in the space is we don't build a parachain. We don't build a network. Like we're just a tool, and we just build the tool, and all these other teams use the tool. Like we don't build the final pages or the different wallets or whatever that is built using SubQuery. We just build the tool. And in a way, that means that we're very impartial. We work with everyone. We work with people that are competition with each other. We work with pretty much most teams in the ecosystem in some capacity. And we make sure that we stay very impartial. We make sure that we just focus on building a really good tool and helping people use it to solve their problems. But you'll see that in terms of the partnerships we have. You'll see that in our Explorer that I showed off. There's all these different logos from all these different teams across the space and all different verticals. You'll see it from the publicity we do and the marketing and the community stuff that we do. We're always talking to different teams around the space because we don't pick favorites. We don't do that. We just kind of work with everyone.
Yeah. So keep your drama away from SubQuery, everybody. Okay. No drama over here.
No drama here, please. We're Kiwis. We're like in the corner of the world. We don't really want to.
And in reality, you guys have all the secrets. Just think about that. Maybe you guys know a lot that we don't know.
My lips are completely sealed.
All the parachain secrets. So I mean, in terms of future, we talked about where you're at with your testnet phase and all of that. But what are where are you in terms of the future roadmap, or what's your ultimate goal or end goal for SubQuery? Where would you really like to see the brand, the company, everything?
As a company, we believe that the future is going to adopt more and more Web3. We believe that Web3 is going to be a slow but gradual and inevitable shift. And so really everything we do is framed with the view of how can we enable this transition. And what we do at SubQuery is enable it by making it more easy to access and manage data that is in a decentralized blockchain kind of format. Okay, so really that long-term goal is just whatever we can build around tools to make that easy. And so that might include building a decentralized version. That includes expanding to other layer ones that don't have a tool like SubQuery, because the more of us building, the more of us creating amazing new applications, the more of us. The key test, I think, is Marie, is can your parents use that application? Can your parents have some crypto? Can your parents engage with blockchain? Because the day that your parents can, and my parents definitely aren't that techno literate. I don't know about yours, but the day that my parents can will be a big indication that we as an industry have done what we can, and we've achieved mainstream success. So whatever we can do to help us move to that point, that goal, we're going to do at SubQuery.
I am passionate about that topic because this is actually something that I spoke to Natalie Brunell about when we were speaking on an interview, and just about, in terms of adoption and, is this really something that I could see my grandparents or my parents being able to do? And at this point, it's hard, right? So I love that you're taking that into consideration, because I think a big something that's super important here is adoption. It's a really, really important to the success, right? So any way that can be made easier and can be better explained and just be higher functioning really in a way is really going to drive us forward. So props to you there for everything you said. So I only have a couple more questions for you, but I'm curious to know some of the major challenges that you faced while building, because I think it's really easy to sit here and talk about all of the good things as always, but it's not easy. Like, I think, it sounds great. Oh yeah, we launched a toolkit, or, when I talk to other parachains, but it's hard. And I think people need to know that, like there is challenges you face, but the perseverance is a big part of it too, so.
Yeah, like there's always challenges across different like types, and we kind of gloss over the challenges. We all kind of it's like a macho thing, right? Like from a technical point of view, like we're constantly facing the challenges of how do we make it more reliable, so that when like a node goes down or something, that it still kind of retries and doesn't fail, and how do we make sure that it's the data that's in it is verifiable, valid? How do we make sure that how can we speed up indexing for the first time? How can we figure out ways to allow re-indexing faster? All these things that that constantly keep us up at night, and we're constantly working on. But there's more than just technical challenges, and I think we always focus on the technical challenges because we're all very technical people. We're full of developers in the space, but there's also challenges around how do we educate people? How do we reach out to as many people as possible in a way that I don't have to hop on a phone call with people around the ecosystem? How do we work together to be more than the sum of our parts in this ecosystem? How do we incentivize and encourage new developers from Web 2 to come in and try Web 3? How do we encourage people to build better applications that help our grandparents jump onto Web 3? And these are all challenges that we've faced and we're thinking about constantly. Education is a big thing for us. The amount of effort we put into our documentation kind of reveals that. Grants to encourage and incubate the next teams is another initiative that we do to encourage people to build and try it out risk-free. Giving them free access to a hosted service is another way, right? Like, just don't worry about infrastructure, just focus on building. Don't worry about the homework, just go off and build. So there's more than just technical challenges, and I think one thing that we do at SubQuery a lot is we try to think a lot more outside the box in terms of what other challenges we face, but also teams that were like us 2 years ago, what they face, because that's what we need to do as an ecosystem.
Totally. And again, as you said, what's interesting about the challenges and me asking about subqueries, a lot of your challenges are challenges that really we should all be thinking about in the space also, right? And something that, not maybe the technical aspect, as you said, but, a lot of the rest of it is stuff that we all really need to think about as an ecosystem also. So love that you said that. So in terms of, this is my last question because I really wanted to hear about this, because something I was really impressed with about SubQuery was going through your YouTube channels and your education systems. So you don't just talk about SubQuery, you are very united with the ecosystem. And we talked about this as, you are kind of a partner of everybody really in a sense. You have an interview series, you host Twitter spaces, super active on YouTube. And I love to see that united ecosystem. So that's incredible. Like, tell us a bit about your interviews or other series or other things that you have going on aside from just working on the project.
Yeah. Well, you can thank our head of marketing, Rob. He's got a really hard whip that he cracks a lot of me and makes sure I film a lot of these. But no, they're good. So again, it comes back to us that mindset that we don't pick favorites. We work with most teams in the ecosystem, if not pretty much all of them at some point. And that position that we have, that it's kind of a privilege to be in that position. And so it's about us giving back. And we're lucky to have a pretty big Twitter, Discord following. How can we share information about the different projects that work with us? Because some of these guys don't, but they're doing really amazing stuff. So yeah, a lot of publicity around that. Generally, I try to not talk as much. I try to be very quiet and listen more, which is always a challenge. I like to talk. But we do a lot of what we call SubQuery sessions, where we do a deep dive into a project and hear what they're building and how they're using SubQuery and what their goals are. Very similar to what you've done today with me. But we're also starting to do more collaborative spaces actually on Twitter. So we did our first one. We're calling a first of our Twitter Spaces series 2 days ago, on Monday actually. Sorry, it's already Thursday, and that was around covering, for example, Kala and Imbu. Imbu is building a new way to raise funding for projects, and talking about how stable coins play an important part in the ecosystem and what can learn from the Terra project. So it's more around like current affairs and talking to different projects about how they're working together, how we're working with us, and how we're all kind of doing the same things and had this shared goal of something. So we'll do a lot more of that coming up as well, because it's always interesting to hear. I feel like, this interview is really good. It's long form, so we talked about deep stuff, but most interviews that we hear is very short, 20 minutes. You just scratch the surface of what the project's doing, and you don't get to hear from the founders about what their thinking is, not of their project, not describing their product or their project or service, more around what their thinking is about other things, because there's some really smart people, some really interesting people in the space, and it's about bringing those people to the stage.
You know what? Absolutely. And that's why I like to cover the project, but I like to throw in some random questions in there. And I know a couple times I've asked, about what your view is of the metaverse, or where do you think we are in terms of, like, I just like to hear the different perspectives, and it really kind of draws in different opinions and values and things you usually wouldn't talk about when you're just talking about, all the technical aspects, but it's really interesting to hear. So yeah, that's I've enjoyed. I really really enjoy this for that aspect, and just the education piece. And so I understand with you guys doing it, just the whole united ecosystem is amazing to see. So I will be tuning in to your Twitter Spaces regularly. You can catch me there, and yeah, I just really appreciate and respect what you guys are doing. So way to go.
Yeah, and it's not just about talking to our own ecosystem, it's about talking to other ecosystems, right? Like Polkadot's just one of many different ecosystems out there. And as we go to more, it's been interesting from our perspective seeing how they're talking about the same things in their own kind of bubble, and same things that we're talking about here. And they're having the same problems, and the same kind of application ideas are being developed there. And it's fascinating knowing that we're not kind of unique in a way. We're unique in some ways, but there's a lot of similar thinking over there. And one thing that we're looking at doing more of the time is cross-pollinating those, bringing in a team from Avalanche, let's say, to talk to someone from Polkadot about, they might be doing very similar projects, and explaining how they approach things slightly differently, or how they're taking advantage of the certain advantages of those different ecosystems. So those are where we'll kind of move towards, and that's also important. It's not just speaking the bubble, it's kind of breaking that bubble.
I think you're 100% correct there. And I often, it's natural for me to talk about Polkadot ecosystem, because that's really where I reside in the community. But you're absolutely right. It really is about multiple different ecosystems, really the crypto space in general. And as I said earlier, more minds, the better. So I really like your perspective there. And that is really all I have in terms of questions for you today. But, hopefully we can touch base in some months and see what you guys are up to. I'm sure you'll have a whole other explanation and some more things to tell me about. So
I look forward to it. Yeah, we're all in this together, and we're going to make it. So
I appreciate you coming on the show, and it was so nice to talk to you. And we'll have to get you next time.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Rory.
Sounds good. Thank you, James. Talk to you later.